When the special vehicle competitors lined up in Darling in February, Brandon Harkis's championship-winning Bat Racing Mark had a new challenger.
The Century Racing team had built a new Class A car, which made its debut in the Western Cape in the hands of Mark Corbett and Rudy Balzar. The special sported a radical design.
But they'd have to contend with a host of fine teams, Shamir Bariawa and Siegfried Rousseau in the Total Motorsport Porter.
Motorites Evan Hutchison and Achim Bergman are the reigning SA champs and look set to clash with Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson in the Regent Racing Bat. Former SA champ Terence Marsh and Peter Groenewald also in Regent colours, and Nodis Alberts and Colin Hunter's Rapsa Bat, together with the Atlas Copcos bearing Nick Harper and Gary Berthold, who are also expected to be a factor. Former SA champs Karl Heinz and Herman Sulwalt were again campaigning Zarkos under the Sulwalt Transport banner.
On the Class B front, champions Jan and Hendrik Krij, who dominated last season in a Regent Racing Bat, brought in Tito Furch to navigate.
And Class B replaced Class S at the end of the season. The new category is for normally aspirated cars with an engine capacity not bigger than 4,000 cc's.
From the off in the Western Cape, it was Variawa and Rousseau who led off the brigade in their big 7-litre Porter Special.
They had a 23-second prologue lead over big Brandon Harkis and the crafty customer Richard Leek in the silver and black motorite Bat. It was certainly purring along beautifully. It's a very huge engine. It's in fact a big beat Chev 6.6 motor.
Naeem Musaji and Rehan Bodhania were third after the 70k prologue in their tyre rack Jimco. And with a Chev 5.7-litre power, it was an awesome sight as it jumped the humps and bumps.
Gary Berthold and newcomer Rally Supremo Pierre Aries in the Azure Blue Atlas Copco came by next.
Karl Heinz Sulwalt and son Quinton had a great win here last year and turned out in screaming canary yellow. The Sulwalt Zarko Magnum LS1 with its big Chevy engine looked menacing.
However, the season started on a cautionary note. Hutchinson and Bergman rolled their motorite Bat. Naeem Musaji subsequently hit them, and that large column of smoke meant that R1 million worth of motorite investment was going up in it.
Up ahead, though, Harkis and Lee, with some real crafty maneuvers up his sleeve, was getting Harkis to go quickly.
But it was Terence Marsh and Peter Groenewald who were laying down the rubber. Regent Racing's former national champion impressing all the way.
With Ruacon CEO Peter Rutherford and his co-driver Johan Boshoff also catching the eye with a solid showing, moving up into the top 5.
The specials have natural air conditioning, no windscreen, thus they're heavily affected by the dust. And in the Darling area it was bad, but Whitehouse and his brother-in-law Carlson never batted an eyelid.
And leading in Class P, it was brothers Johan and Etienne Bezuidenhout in the Adenko Bat.
Variawa and Rousseau got it going and were on a mission to at least get a top 10 after their earlier tangles with disaster.
And they were well on their way to doing just that.
Whitehouse and Carlson here very ably demonstrated just how tough conditions were. Dusty, dry, loose sand. And if you're not careful, you could be camping out there for a while.
And the thing to remember is that the dust doesn't just affect visibility. It gets into moving parts, grinds down, and stresses cooling systems.
Here, the brothers Gary and David won't give you a first-hand experience of just what happens out there. To slow over the sand, and you get stuck and rev, rev, and rev.
And a bit more revving, and, well, then the roof opens. Time to start digging. It's not pretty.
The Sulwalts were quickly working their way up the batting order and up into the top 5, making mincemeat of the notorious Western Cape Sand themselves.
Cully's brother Herman and his co-driver Paul Helberg in the blue Zarko Magnum were closing in on them in turn.
In the B class, it was pure class from Bezuidenhout and De Bruyn, who finished 5th in the specials. One heck of a performance.
With Giel Nel and Dion de Kamp second, but a distant 25 minutes behind.
And trying to hold off a charging Ruacon Bat after the Whites had extricated themselves.
Alistair Stubbs and Mark de Chalane kept plugging away and got 10th place for dogged determination.
With Nick Gosler and Richard Carolyn showing the same qualities in Class B in second with their race go and its Porsche engine.
At left the line after 400 of the driest Ks the boys had raced for a while. It was former driver champion Terence Marsh and Peter Groenewald who took the win.
And the surprise package of the race, Ruthven and De Waal in the Rurikon Bat.
Only 94 seconds separated the two cars after all of that, and the Sulvold siblings had a fine old dice for third, with Cully and Quinton prevailing.
In poker parlance, a full house for Marsh and Groenewald, but most of the fancied names got some bum cards and were nowhere to be seen after the first points of the 08 season had been calculated.
The talk of the town, though, was that the Century Property CR1 Special of Mark Corbett and Rudy Balzer, sporting its radical design, failed to get past the prologue after a power steering pipe buzzed, and they couldn't repair it in time. The car built in-house incorporated an innovative four-wheel drive system and a chassis engine gearbox layout not yet seen locally.
When the circus moved to Port Elizabeth, it was Gary Bertolt and Andre Vermeulen who led away the procession. You can justifiably call Bertolt the prologue king. He's won a few in his time.
And they were certainly very happy to be dust-free right at the top of the result sheet and took full advantage.
In the Longmore Forests, that big Copco's huge 7-litre engine was grinding its way around, while their Copco stablemates Nick and son Ryan Harper left the line.
They were the championship runners-up last year, and it was a close-run affair as the Harpers stepped up their performance a notch and became contenders. Here they were again.
Cully and Quinton Sulvold were looking for win number 2 on their CV and were perfectly placed to start making a gap for the written word.
Clint Gibson and Gary Campbell stormed by next and were fifth. Their bat was looking perfectly set up for the fast stuff in the Eastern Province.
Marsh and Groenewald in the blue and yellow Regent Racing bat with its 2-litre Corvette engine had moved up, and the former national champ was looking to go 2 for 2.
Corbett and Belzar were over their darling disappointment after their new chariot broke down. But here in the forests, they were doing some low-level flying.
Young Cry is known as a man who understands how to drive a car through to the end, and the Keymax bat seemed to know it too. He was leading Class B.
In the new P class, the Bezadenauts were tripping along nicely, keeping their Rodenko bat out of trouble, and then promptly slipped a gear. Happens in the best of families.
David White with Bevan and Gary's dad, Bodo Bertolt, at his side were keeping the youngsters on their toes, second in Class P.
And then to Class B, it was the Rurikon bat of De Bruyn and Brits who were making the pace and making their way up the order at the same time.
With light rain sifting down at times, and after the designated service point halfway through the 430 Ks worth of tough racing, Marsh and Groenewald was still holding station in 7th.
But they were being chased. Mark Corbett and Rudy Balzer had clawed their way from 8th overnight to get into 3rd place in the specials.
While the Sulvolds were in a superb position, they had time to spare over Marsh and Groenewald. In fact, 2 minutes and 47 seconds to be exact.
Gibson and Campbell were firmly ensconced in the top 5, but had to stay ahead of the Harpers. They only had 15 minutes to play with.
But they were not playing. The Harpers were indeed determined to make up for that did not finish next to their name in the Western Cape.
While Herman Sulvold and Paul Helberg were 5th in Class A, making it a really fine day for the Sulvold family.
And in Class P, it was the 2 Dons, Thompson and Blake, who outlasted the rest, the only finisher in the category.
Variawa and Rousseau trundled into view next. Now they'd started off in 38th place, eaten dust all day, and there they were, up into 6th.
Whitehouse and Carson in the 2nd Regent Racing bat was 7th in class, and it made some of the bigger name teams sit up and take notes.
But to Cully and Quinton Sulvold went the accolades. They worked hard for a 2-minute 47-second victory worth 25 points and worth its weight in gold.
Variawa and Rousseau will still be reeling their bad prologue run, which gave them no hope of victory.
But the flag had hardly dropped on the season, and there were still 6 races to go.
With only 2 under the belt, though, it was 05 champ Marsh who was pace-setting, but there was only 4 points in it, as Cully Sulvold's one edged him up.
We'll keep reviewing right after this.
Vehicle and asset finance from ABSA, going off the beaten track to find solutions. Finance from ABSA, overcoming all obstacles.
The third of 8 races in the series, and this part of the season has to be defining for teams, as all the little niggles, failures and settings have to be eliminated, and teams, car, driver and navigator supposed to start delivering consistent results. The Nissan Sugarbolt 400 was crunch time for a lot of special vehicle teams.
Prologue specialist Gary Bertelt and Andre Vermeulen had their second dustless start in a row, and the Atlas Copco was in fine fettle.
Seward and Holberg started quickly, but were also trying to temper the natural instinct to want to go too fast.
Hutchinson and Bergman were back after their opening race burnout, but they had steering shaft trouble and were just holding the Motorite back a bit.
Alberts and Hunter and the Rapsa bat hadn't tasted victory for a while and were ready to dine on that elusive taste again.
Even that 6-litre Chev engine sounds hungry. With the men in second place on the ABSA Championship log, the Silbolts down a few spots after getting stuck in the sugarcane.
The two Dons, Thompson and Blakey, were still firmly entrenched in the top 10 and were putting together a great first loop, leading Class P.
Terence Marsh has always been a consistent, smooth and patient driver, and on the long haul, those qualities get you to the line virtually every time.
With his teammates Michael Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson, who had closed the gap on him slightly, and after starting 9th, had moved up 1 place. Class B leaders Bez Besaidnout and Johan de Bruin in the Edenko bat had also picked up something sweet for the road, but then just about everyone tangled with a sugarcane out there during the day.
With Cry and Furch closing gaps all the time, they were already 4 places to the better.
At halfway, Bertelt was still keeping the Atlas Copco going along, while Vermeulen was doing a great job with his race notes in the lead.
Second in the specials, it was a handily placed Evan Hutchison and Achim Bergman in the Motorite bat, getting into their stride as the sun came out again.
But they were feeling the pressure. Hunter and Alberts were doing the chasing and pulling closer than the margin for comfort allowed.
The dust in KZN was stifling at times, and it's doubly as bad for the special vehicle lads. They've got nowhere to hide.
Whitehouse and Carlson in that second Regent Racing bat were applying huge dollops of pressure, only 20 seconds behind and riding crop in the hand.
Meanwhile, John Moore and Tom Clarkson in the Free Spirit had quietly worked their way into 8th place in class and were doing fantastically.
With Herman Seward and Paul Helberg in their Zarko Magnum with its huge Chevy engine also right in the thick of things.
With Class P leader, the Edenko bat of the brothers Besaidnout in complete control with a big time gap.
Cully and Quinton Seward were holding their place in the Zarko, 5th, and looking for mistakes from the men in front of them.
Now with the finish line in sight, all the drivers were giving it horn.
Jan Cry and Tito Furcht were comfortably leading Class B by a massive 16 minutes. They just had to keep it on its wheels to win.
The Century Property boys in Class B, Simon Beckett and Steve Harris, ran well all day long and kept the Cries honest.
And Mellon de Kock was always intent on getting the Luke Truggy to the line, and they did.
Now, talking about the line, Bertelt and Vermeulen broke the tape first. A huge win for the Atlas Copco team, while Motorite was more than happy to score opening points with Hutchison and Bergman. Moore and Klaassen surprised with a fine 4th place.
The Silbots leapfrogged Marsh and Groenewald as a result, but now they led by 4 points. The halfway mark of the season was approaching.
And when it arrived, it was Hutchison and Bergman who have triumphed in Botswana before and wanted to do it again. They were 81 seconds ahead at the finish line in Kumukwane after the prologue and led the specials away.
Now, as Alberts and Jeff Minute had given away very little and were firmly ensconced in 2nd place in the specials.
Matthews and Smith were feeling the desert dust, but had a steady rhythm going in 3rd.
With the category hotting up as Nick Harper hit his stride as well. His standing navigator Andrew Chalupsky was also doing a great job.
The Sulvold Zarko was growling in full throat on the way to a fourth fastest time to DSP, but it took its toll.
John Moore and Tom Klaassen had a great second day's racing, but they too fell victim to the Kalahari Desert savage conditions.
Albertson Minute had grabbed the lead and were having a good time on day 2. But they too were destined to suffer mechanical troubles. The desert is tough on body and machine.
And in second in the special vehicle class, it was the Atlas Copco of Harper and his standing co-driver Chalupsky. A very solid performance.
But as we keep telling you, the Kalahari provides as many perils as the high seas.
Bush, sand, little visibility, and lots of dust.
Lots of dust. Variawa and Rousseau had passed almost a dozen cars and were rocketing up the pecking order in the Total Motorsport Porter.
Championship leaders Collie and Quinton Sulvold had the bit between their teeth in the brand new, or perhaps not so new, bat.
With Whitehouse and Carlson up into the top 5 for the first time in the 08 Toyota Botswana Kalahari 1000 Desert Race.
Herman Sulvold and Paul Helberg were looking good and were working hard over a hot steering wheel.
While Terence Marsh and his nav Peter Groenewald were super consistent and all the way up from 28th overall, despite wheel alignment problems which hampered them.
And in the P-Class, Johan and Etienne Besaidnout were trying to again outlast all comers in their Rurikon bat.
While Peter Ruthven and Deval Boshoff were trying to get the Rurikon bat home to the finish after a tough 500k round trip.
And Bez Besaidnout was again controlling his Edenko bat well in Class B.
After day 2, the Rapsa pairing of Albertson Minute were ahead by almost 6 minutes.
But then there was Variawa, Harper and Matthews, all within striking distance.
On day 3, with 400 k's to race, Albertson Minute streaked away from the line, but were headed for disaster. They hit a rock, broke the rear suspension, and that was their desert race run.
Variawa, still on a high after the birth of his second child just 3 days before, was driving like a man possessed. Rousseau had to hold on tight to the car and his race notes.
With Nick Harper and stand-in nav Andrew Chalupsky in the turquoise Atlas Copco bat in third, chasing loads of dust.
Regents Matthews and Smith weren't exactly holding back either.
And the Sulvolds, father Kali, son Quinton, were chasing for all they were worth too. They were protecting that championship lead.
Whitehouse and Carlson in the Regent Racing bat was super steady and got quicker and more determined as the day grew older.
And you can say that again for Marsh and Groenewald, their teammates.
In the Rurikon bat, the Whites were also gliding along early on, leading Class P.
With Besaidnout and De Bruyn, like they have virtually all season, setting the pace in Class B.
With De Bruyn and Brits trying to chase them down in the second place.
But it was dusty work in the hot desert sun.
With the brothers Besaidnout, that's Johan and Etienne in the Edenko bat in the top position in Class P.
Up front, it was Variawa and Rousseau who had stormed into the lead after the Rapsa bat had succumbed to one of the desert's harder objects after 30 k's.
Harper and Chalupsky came by next, getting every ounce of power and speed out of the Atlas Copco's grunting 6 litres.
The Sulvolds, defending champions, were enjoying their new bat, but also were tensely watching the overheating gauges. They were almost into the red.
Michael Whitehouse switched from navigating to piloting the Regent Racing bat, and on the way to 4th place, he was obviously loving the change.
The Colin Matthews-Alan Smith combination were keeping a beady eye on proceedings. And if you watch carefully, well, you'll understand why.
scary to say the least. Marsh and Groenewald were looking for the finish line, but they were not quite there yet. In 6th, and steady as she goes.
In Class B, the Cape crew of Bez Bezuidenhout and Johan de Bruin in their silver and blue Adenko bat outlasted the rest and were on their way to a second-class win of the year.
And in Class B, there was family joy for the Bezuidenhouts, Johan and Etienne, who clinched the Class P win.
The attrition rate was high. 28 specials entered, only 11 made it to the line. De Bruin and Brits was the 9th team to do it.
They were 8 minutes up on Derry Tatoy and James Hutton, who piloted their bat into 10th place in the special category and 3rd in Class B.
While the two Dons, Thompson and Blakey, were the last finishers in 11th place. That gave them 2nd in class.
But the best drive of the race and their best performance of the season went to Variawa and Rousseau. The Total Motorsport duo were 23rd overall after the prologue, but finished 5th. The team in red and blue were overcome with joy. A long-awaited victory after 1 or 2 early season hiccups.
For Variawa, this ended a 15-year drought. That's how long he's been trying to taste victory in the Kalahari Desert. And he was just more than 2.5 minutes ahead of Harper.
An emotional win for Shamir Variawa. The Total Motorsport man took a long-awaited victory. Fatherhood is a powerful thing, and it left the rest of the field in his wake this time.
But the Sulvolt's 3rd place assured them of their place at the top of the championship log. They look like a good bet to still be up there after all 8 races.
Until next time, you keep it on the road.
We'll keep it off-road.